More and more NFL draft experts are talking about how the centers in this draft class are falling in their value, but that could end up being a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. On today's Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We got Nick Farabaugh talking about that and my latest expert mock draft. All that here and more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 back, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And as I said before in the intro, we are joined by Nick Farabaugh. He's in the house from SteelersNow.com. And we're talking all things here on the NFL draft. Nick is always astute in his evaluations, and he's checking on guys, he's studying guys, and he's talking about it on Steelers Now and with our guy Derek, who we had on last week. But Nick, I want to talk to you about all the continued NFL draft analysts that continue to flood the airwaves with, hey, this center class, not saying it's not talented, but these guys aren't first-round picks. These guys are second-round picks, and it seems like even the Jackson Powers-Johnsons, the Zach Fraziers, the guys who we've been talking about on this show as potentially being like, hey, the Steelers need to get these guys or else. Those guys might not necessarily be the move that the Steelers really should make in the first round. And we've talked about that a bit here, but it seems like more and more people nationally are coming around on this center class as well.
It does. And listen, I think it's the media catching up to the league. Heard whispers of this. I've known about the Jackson Powers-Johnson medical stuff since the combine. Like that was a thing.
Explain the Jackson Powers-Johnson medical stuff, by the way, for listeners who don't know.
So, Dane Brugler today reported that it was he had continued hip and groin issues this year, and then he pulled his hamstring at the Senior Bowl. So, triple whammy, multiple concussions throughout his career. So that's really where it is, and that's where it lies. So those medicals are important for Jackson Powers-Johnson, but that's also kind of in conjunction with the fact that, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's a guy that is a very good player, I love the player, was never going to go, 16 to the Seahawks. Probably not 20 to the Steelers. Like that was always a little unrealistic, and it really shot up after the Senior Bowl. That's right. He had a great one day at the Senior Bowl, shot up, and then where does he go from there? I think, really, when we talk about these guys, man, it's indicative of the history of the position in the NFL draft, right? Centers routinely are just not drafted very high. Now, there have been first-round centers, Tyler Linderbaum and Cesar Ruiz, and, you go back further, but it's just not a position that traditionally goes round one. There's usually a fall of these guys, like obviously the notorious one here in Pittsburgh is Creed Humphrey, but that's pretty indicative of the position. It's just, It's not a premium position. And so those guys fall. And it's kind of what happens at that spot. So that's really what this is. It's just the history lining up with it. And, especially in a class where we talk about the tackles, the corners, the receivers, all of these loaded position groups, teams are going to go for the premium position.
And a reminder, too, Creed Humphrey was the third center picked in that draft. It wasn't like he was everyone was looking at Landon Dickerson and Josh Myers, and some people were even considering Quinn Miners, but then Creed Humphrey went late in the next to last pick in the second round of the draft. And so, people, when they talk about Creed Humphrey like he was a sure thing, a lot of people didn't feel that way, and that's why he fell to the bottom end of the second round. And you look throughout the years, like you're saying, like it's not always that there's a first round center in those draft classes. But again, I think this is a very good thing for the Steelers. You look at how this could play out, where the worry has been, if the Steelers take a tackle or take a corner or take a wide receiver, one of those three primary positions where this draft is very strong, and if you get one in the first round, you might be getting a franchise player at any of those positions. a lot of people have been worried if you do that there, you're going to have to trade up and cough up, a pick to cough up another pick that you need because you have several needs in this draft, and you're going to miss, and if you don't, you might miss out on those top centers there in that situation. And I want to talk about center rankings later in the show. We'll come back to that later. But Nick, I actually think, I know for some people, there's some people that just don't agree. They think the Steelers just need to go get center. But I talked about this on yesterday's show for Locked On Steelers. But how many times have the Steelers put themselves in a bad spot because they reached for need, not for value, not for, they didn't go and get the player that they thought was the best player available. They went and got a position that they thought would complete their roster, regardless of the value of the position or the value of the player versus other players that were available at that time. And I feel like doing that at center in the first round could end up coming back to bite them there. Am I off there in that evaluation?
No, I mean, what if you had to take Graham Barton or Jackson Powers-Johnson there, but J.C. Latham's on the board? I mean, right? Like, you want J.C. Latham, or Brian Thomas is a guy you love, or Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion Arnold falls. Like, center is not the only position in need this team has. Very clearly, they need a receiver, they need a tackle, they need a corner, they need D-line. So by opening up a hole like that and not having an answer, you could reach. But I think the Steelers last year, by the way Omar Khan and Andy Weidel felt out the board, had a great understanding of what other teams were thinking. The calculated trade-up of Broderick Jones, Keanu Benton falling right into their laps, trading back 13 spots, acquiring a 4th-round pick, and still getting Darnell Washington, and then later getting Nick Herbig with that acquired pick. Like, they had a beautiful kind of feel of how these guys were going to fall on the board. And I think it's indicative of them. The Steelers' first-round interests so far have been largely concentrated at tackle, wide receiver, and corner. That's been pretty clear. And center has been concentrated in the second round, it feels like. Jackson Powers-Johnson, Zach Frazier, Sedrick Van Pran, that third round even you can throw in there. It seems like that's where they're kind of feeling it out. So that jives with what we're hearing here. And this is a great thing for the Steelers, because what we're talking about here is, all right, at 20th overall, now you can get a Marius Mims, and then maybe you can back it up with Jackson Powers-Johnson or Zach Frazier. Or you can get A.D. Mitchell, and then you can get Jackson Powers-Johnson or Zach Frazier. Like, any of these combos sound really good, right? Terrion Arnold, whoever, one of those centers sounds awesome. And so that's where they're at right now. Now, I still think personally that this is a top 2 round need, and they have pigeonholed themselves a little bit. But I also think that they have a pretty good feel of the board and are in a spot at 20 where they can go BPA at one of their other needs that is a premium position in a strong class at those 3 spots.
I'm right with you there. And in fact, I recently was part of an expert mock draft. When I say expert, I mean this was me amid all these other people that cover the different teams that are involved in this mock draft on the Raider Nation Radio Network. My guy, your boy Keon Myers, he runs the Locked On Raiders podcast, but he also runs Raider Nation Radio, and they wanted to do around the country. Every team who gets covered, they have a selection there, and I came up at 20th. I want to show you guys how the board fell according to this board and the direction I went. And I want to see if Nick agrees with where I went. We'll do that all here in the next segment of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the #1 sportsbook in America, and it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball is also in full swing, which makes FanDuel your best place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 back in bonus bets, and that's guaranteed with your first bet, win or lose. That's $150 that you can use on point spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more, including who's going to win it all in any of those leagues. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, and all in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use that you can download right to your phone right now, or go to their website, FanDuel.com/lockedon. When you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, you can sign up for the great promo of getting $150 back in bonus bets with guaranteed with your first bet, and you'll make your first bet an automatic win. And again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon for new customers to get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. And that's from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Nick, let's get into some mock drafting here. Now, I've done like experimental mocks. Oftentimes, if I post them on Twitter, just to post them on Twitter, that's me just like an AMA, like ask me anything, but just this version of, what do y'all think of this draft? Like the other day, I was sitting around waiting for Pat Narduzzi for like an hour, and I was like, why not? Let's just see what people think of this latest mock that I did. But this one was more of a serious mock where I sat down there. Now, we've done an official mock for Locked On. I'm not allowed to talk about that until that is produced by our producers. But this was a different kind of mock. Like I said before, if you know about Keon Myers, your boy Q, he hosts Locked On Raiders on this podcast network, but he's also a bigwig. He runs the Raider Nation Radio Network, which is directly affiliated with the team. He travels with the team. He's an awesome guy. He and I did Locked On NFL for years together. And so he calls upon me whenever he wants to talk Steelers, and he wanted to make me the Steelers draft pick guy as they did their own mock draft around the country. Now, I'm going to break down how this board fell for you, Nick, so that you can see, and I want to get your reactions on how things fell and where everything should work for what the Steelers need moving forward. So, first overall pick, Bears, pretty easy, Caleb Williams. After that, number 2 to the Commanders, Jaden Daniels. Then immediately afterwards, Drake May, number 3 to the as a quarterback. Bang, bang, bang to the Patriots. The 3 straight quarterbacks off the board. That's as predicted. And this kind of falls in chalk here. Number 4 is Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals. Makes a lot of sense. Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver, to the Chargers at 5. And then it starts to get interesting because at 6, the Giants go with J.J. McCarthy. So there's your 4th quarterback off the board. Joe Alt goes to the Titans at 7. Latu goes to the Falcons at 8. Rome Odunze goes to the why are they not listed here? The Bears at 9. And then Brock Bowers goes to the Jets at 10. Chop Robinson goes to the Vikings at 11. I didn't see that one coming. I like Chop Robinson, but I didn't think 11th overall. But hey, Michael Penix, then it comes your 4th quarterback off the board at 12 to the Broncos, which I thought is crazy. Before we go any further, Nick, do you see 5 quarterbacks going before the Steelers pick at 20? I'm sorry. I just don't see that happening with Penix. People believe in J.J. McCarthy, and I don't get it. But you can buy me on one of those guys going. I'm sorry. You can't buy me on. You can't sell me on Penix or Bo Nix going before the Steelers.
I don't see it. That's a reach, man. I mean, Bo Nix, first of all, it feels like the Broncos are more of a Bo Nix destination.
Agreed.
Penix destination. The Raiders would be the Penix destination if there was one, but let's be real, guys. I mean, come on. Watch the tape. Use your logic.
Hey,
these are not top 15 guys. And
hey, these are the experts that cover the teams that they're giving their opinions. But let's keep it rolling here. The Raiders at 13 went with J.C. Latham. That's who they took, and that makes a lot of sense. Dallas Turner, the edge rusher, goes to the Saints at 14. At 15, the Colts get Quinyon Mitchell, first corner off the board here. And that's interesting value right there. 16, Troy Fautanu to the Seahawks. And then 17, Brian Thomas Jr. to the Jaguars. At 18, Byron Murphy to the Bengals. And then at 19, Jerzon Newton, the defensive tackle from Illinois, he goes to the Rams. So that being said, there are 5 quarterbacks that go off the board. Counting here real quick, I believe 4 wide receivers, 3 edge rushers, and 2 tackles that are off the board. No, 3 tackles, excuse me. Fautanu, Latham, and Alt. So 3 tackles are off the board here. So based off of who I just read you here, Nick, I want to hear who you would go for and who you think who you think I picked in this situation.
I hope are in lockstep. This should be the easiest pick of all time to me. If it's not Olu Fashanu, I think there might be a problem.
Ooh, sir. I would
go with Olu Fashanu.
I went against Olu Fashanu.
Ooh, who'd you go with?
I went with Taliese Fuaga.
Taliese Fuaga.
Taliese, excuse me. But I went with Fuaga, man. Like, I love his run blocking tape. I know that Fashanu he's really good. I loved Fuaga. I maybe this is part of like the just me falling too much in love with someone's tape, and I see that size and I see the aggression, and I think he's the prime right tackle. Put him over there. Put Broderick Jones at left, and let those dudes go to work for the next decade. I looked at this and I'm still going back and forth because I've studied Fashanu less because I came into this draft process thinking he's going to be gone before the Steelers pick, but more and more people are starting to bump him down. Nick, compare and contrast Fuaga versus Fashanu in this situation.
Dude, Fashanu is just the tools and upside are
he does have
awesome.
The upside. I absolutely agree.
I think he's a little bit greener than Fuaga and Fautanu for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree with that. And I get he's not the right tackle that bumps Broderick back to left. But to me, in pure talent terms, this guy is a blue chip prospect. I mean, that's what I view him as. I don't view Fuaga in the same light. And here's why. I think Fuaga doesn't have elite length and sometimes gets beat to the outside shoulder a little bit too much. And to me, when you get beat to the outside shoulder a ton, and he does on tape, and it's a struggle sometimes in pass pro, what that signals to me is this is a guy that could potentially move inside. And I am worried a little bit. I don't know how much you would weigh the risk of a guy like Fuaga potentially slipping inside. Now, that's not a huge issue potentially, right? Because Fautanu is the same way, where he has a similar issue and might slip inside. But Fashanu is going to be a bone-stamped left tackle. So this is a guy that has really good feet already, mixes up his pass sets well, little raw in the hand usage department. I think that's where he gets beat a little bit, can sometimes get a little sloppy, but really athletic. Both are going to get out in space. I love Fuaga's run block. Fuaga might be the best run blocker in the class. So
that's why I picked him. What the Steelers want to become very, very soon is a dominant road grading offense, right? And that's where I feel like that with Broderick Jones, and then if they go get like a Zach Frazier in the second round, I think this offensive line, I think they wouldn't come on, it wouldn't fly off the track because they need time to gel and they're young and everything. But I think that could be a core that cooks for some years.
I get it. I love Fuaga. I think he's a great player. I just think there is risk here where he is not a long-term tackle. Now, how much you care about that, it's up to you. I mean, look at how the guard market exploded. Very clearly, teams are valuing guard. So, okay, obviously you're going to give him year one at tackle. But let's say he's struggling in pass pro with similar issues. James Daniels' contract is up. Maybe you bump him inside. It's fine. I think he will be an elite guard if that happens. I think he can be a good right tackle. I just think Fashanu has potential to be an all-pro left tackle. And, that's if you draft Fashanu, like, I'm sorry to Broderick Jones, but get ready to learn right tackle full-time. Like, that's what that happens. So it's not ideal. So I understand the thought process. I understand the thought process of Fuaga as an elite run blocker. There's probably going to be teams, honestly, that are going to agree with you, Chris. I think, Fuaga versus Fashanu is not as cut and dry as we have been making it out to be among the NFL teams. I'm just a big believer in Fashanu's tape and ability and what he's shown. I think he's kind of a bit of prospect fatigue right now where he's been around, right? He was been top tackle.
That might be it. People have just bumping him with the top two for since the start of the year, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is a guy that came on the radar last year and would have been the top tackle off the board if he had declared probably last year. So, I mean, that's the type of guy we're talking about. He's a blue chip prospect to me. Not to everybody, though. And I understand with the Steelers, the fit is perfect with Fuaga. And if you can consider the fact that he might slip inside, but you don't care about that because are you going to pay James Daniels? I don't know. He's going to have a very hefty contract coming to him whenever they do pay him, if they do. So if you don't care about him slipping inside, say Amalo's older too, so if you need to flip him over there, feel free to do that. He could be an elite guard. I think it's just about where you think, where Fuaga is. Is he a right tackle? Do you like him on the interior? I know a lot of respected valuers and people in the NFL view him as a guard. So it's kind of where you pick your poison there. But, dude, if you go to 20 and you have Fashanu, Fuaga, and Mims, all on the board,
that is a pick your poison, or pick your feast, I guess. In that situation,
really
you love
is,
that
right?
situation.
So if you value the run blocking, you're gonna go with Fuaga. If you value, the pure upside, physical traits, blue chip type, 5-star type traits,
right,
you're gonna go with Fashanu. And you could even make an argument just off pure upside for Mims. But Fashanu versus Fuaga, it's really your feelings on where Fuaga slots in. And if you're okay with Fuaga potentially slipping inside later, I think it's fun. But I think, Fuaga, man, is a dominant run blocker. And there's no doubt. Imagine this. We've talked about these centers. If
Sure.
round 1 is Taliese Fuaga and round 2 is Jackson Powers Jones,
Ooh,
how good that run game would be.
That'd be fun to watch. I'll say that much. I want to go right here quickly to the measurables you were talking about. Officially, Fuaga was just under 6'6". He was like 6'5" and a little over 6'5.5". So like he's on the plus side of 6'5", but not officially 6'6". Fashanu is 6'6" straight up, like on the dot according to the measurements there. And then also, Fuaga has just under an inch longer of an arm span. He's at 34 inches long. Fuaga's at 33 and an eighth. So that's not bad, but Fashanu getting that there. But I want to get your thoughts on those two, but also this. Fashanu's hand size is 8.5 compared to Fuaga's 10.1. Is that something to care about there? Like, again, that's not me saying that you should, but I look at that. I'm like, when I come think of tackles, I want length, I want strength, I want power. Hand size, I don't know.
The single most baffling physical stat of the cycles, Olu Fashanu's hand size.
I mean, it's small.
Crazy, a man that large has that hand size. Does it matter that much? Not really. I mean, if your grip strength is good, your grip strength is good, right? Now, your target kind of is a little smaller because you're gonna go boom like that.
Right.
But if you miss, the recovery is a little bit tougher when your hands are a little smaller, because when you're smaller and you want to grab, you're more like gonna do this, right? Like you're gonna grab. You can definitely kind of prone yourself to some holding penalties. I don't think it's a huge deal. And I don't think it shows up in Fashanu's game as like something that hurts him. Meanwhile, like, with Fuaga, like some of I think some of his length issues where you're talking about that extra inch, like it does sometimes show up at times where, you have a guy that gets beat to the outside a little bit because he doesn't have like elite lateral agility either to make up for the lack of length. So those things, like just with having average lateral agility, he can get beat to the outside shoulder a little bit and get beat around the bit. Like that's something where teams are going to look and say, okay, you can be a guard. Fashanu, it's like, dude, just hit the guy straight up. Like that's his thing. It's like, get the hand placement down, man. Like, and he'll be fine. So yeah, I view these two, not far apart personally to me. I mean, when you get Joe Alt's to clear one, like when you get into Fashanu, Fuaga, Latham, Mims, like Fautanu, like you can
move around a lot
any way you want. You can make an argument for all of those players as the two. I think Fashanu is the two personally, but Fuaga with the run blocking is going to be, if that's what you value, him and Latham are really going to pop to you.
Latham's another guy that popped. If Latham fell to 20, guess what? I was going to be picking Latham too. But I want to get back to the center talk, and I want to go over center rankings, and not just the traditional centers we've been talking about, but some of the players that people have been talking about flipping to center, including some of the ones that we have, some of the ones that we might have mentioned this show that weren't centers. We thought we called them a tackle. There's one player there as well. We'll do that more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you that we are also sponsored by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof rack, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Nick Farabaugh of SteelersNow.com. Nick, let's get back into some center talk here. So before we go through the actual rankings of centers here, I want to get your opinion on two players who some people are talking about as potential centers who aren't listed as one officially in a lot of places. And one of them's one we've talked about a lot, Graham Barton out of Duke. He's really athletic, tested amazingly in this offseason. And a lot of people were talking about, man, just find a place for him somewhere in your offensive line. But there's a recent one that you guys wrote about that could be an extra one here who we mentioned early in the show, but not as a center. Do you think either A, Barton, or B, the person that you're about to say, would be doable options for the Steelers if they wanted to pick a center and it's not one of the guys that are traditional centers right now?
Yeah, the other guy is Troy Fautanu, who we obviously just mentioned. Could he actually be a center? Dude, I'm like, it's funny because like I've been the guy clamoring for like 2 years to play guys in their natural positions, and then I'm throwing out Troy Fautanu at a center. And it's like Barton and Fautanu are like the rare types of guys that are just can play anywhere, can play wherever you want. They have the perfect like profile to do it. They've showcased their ability to do it. The hands and the feet are so polished, and they have and the more important thing to me is they have the athleticism to do it. Fautanu is another great athlete who, if you just imagine Troy Fautanu at center going out to reach block a linebacker. Funny, he can do it. Same thing with Graham Barton. There's more projection there, though. And Fautanu is, to me, I actually like Fautanu at tackle. And so play him at the premium spot, right? Like you play him at left tackle. So that's where Fautanu will probably be. But, dude, if any team is crazy enough to ever put him at center, he would be a fantastic center. 100%. The snapping thing is kind of going to be the biggest hurdle for him. He would be a great center. He has the hand usage, footwork, lateral agility, football IQ, all of it to do that. And Barton does too. Barton, though, is a much more realistic option at center because he played there in his freshman year. I know that's a long time ago, but you look at the traits he has from the athleticism, the just polished. I think the hand usage part to me, along with length, anchor, and core strength, is what really makes a center, right? Like, can you handle power from these quick, smaller guys that are going to get up under you? Like, that's what it is nowadays, right? The modern 3-tech is a 6'2", 300-pound guy that's got a great get-off and is going to snap up through you. And, like, Barton and Fautanu both have great core strength, great anchors, great hand usage, and can stymie those types of guys. And they have length. Like, Fatanu's arms are 34 and a half inch for a center. Yeah. That would be a cheat code because you could just get up on those smaller guys. Like when we talked about Kendrick Green's struggles, a big part of those were length related. Like guys would just get into him, right? And he
didn't have that core strength either to battle them off.
Right. But these guys do. And so when you're asking me, okay, how am I sure that Graham Barton, who played left tackle most of his career, could be a good center? These are why. He's got the traits. Like most of Graham Barton's losses are when he like opens the gate inside or doesn't get deep enough in his set outside. Like that's not an issue at center. And so he's a really projectable player. I think, the Fautanu stuff is just like me, galaxy braining things that I would love to see. Because I'm like, oh my goodness, this man could be incredible. But Fautanu's like a really good left tackle. And I stick him at left tackle. Like I always say, don't move good tackles away from tackle. So I'm being a hypocrite by saying that, but man, I would love to see it just for one game.
So let's take Fautanu out. Let's take Fautanu out and let's go over where you see the rankings falling here. I've seen our guy Alan Saunders. I think he's on the train of Zach Frazier is center 1 in this draft class. Where are you? Give us a top 5 or the list of centers who you think are day 1 starter. The guys that the Steelers could draft and legitimately expect to be starters from the start of this upcoming season.
Oh well, this list is going to be shorter than 5. It's going to be 3.
Okay.
3.5. Okay, 3.5. I'll explain the half later. 1 is Graham Barton by a hair. 2 is then Jackson Powers-Johnson. Then you have a little bit of a gap for me. Then Zach Frazier. And then my half is Sedrick Van Pran-Granger. And I just think, Barton and Powers-Johnson are the athletic types that we talked about. that have great core strength, great hand usage. I think Powers Johnson's a little raw just because we like 1 year of experience at center, and doesn't have as polished technique as Barton does, where that's just going to go from position to position, work the hand usage, the footwork, the quickness, all that stuff. But Powers Johnson is a special athlete and can get out in space. Barton is a special athlete, can get out in space. These guys, to me, are guys that when we talk about the run game, if planted into Arthur Smith's run scheme, can change the outlook of the run scheme, opens up the whole playbook. Zach Frazier, I think, is a little less, I guess, projectable into the scheme because he's not the special athlete those two are. He lacks a little bit of anchor against power. Watch the tape against Texas if you want to know what I'm talking about there with Byron Murphy, but still a very good, steady pass protector, but just not quite the special athlete. I think where Allen, and I'll say this is with Chris, I think where Allen gets into the Zach Frazier center one combo is he is the most, okay, I watch him at center, I see what he does at center, and I just plop him in there and he's a decade starter guy. Like that's what he is. Like he is the, okay, if I don't want any projectable, I want the safest dude that's just going to boom right in there. That's Zach Frazier. He's the least risk. I think he's the most risk-free of those three because Powers Johnson is a little raw, has the medicals. Barton, you're transitioning from tackle to center. So there's risks inherently in that. Like Frazier, on the other hand, does have the medical stuff with the leg, obviously from this past year, but the tape is like boom, 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 very polished. Doesn't have a super high ceiling, but what he's getting. Very good player. Very good player is Zach Frazier. And then Van Pran is kind of, dude, I'm on the fence with Sedrick Van Pran about starting day one. I think ideally he's not. He's gonna be a guy, that isn't like right away ready to go in pass pro. I don't see it. He struggles a little bit with power, but he has the core strength and the anchor ability, I think, to really last. I think he needs to polish the hand usage, though. The run game stuff, it can be a little muddy. I don't know if he has the lateral athleticism and the fluidity and space to really get after it in a scheme like Arthur Smith's. So I don't know. I think, that's 3.5. I see the traits with Van Pran. I think he's a little rawer than the rest. And if you're looking, at that third tier, which, is not these four guys, and you're looking at like elite athletes at the position, there are guys in this class, Tanner Bordolini, Dom Puny, Bo Limmer, that are like, if I want a developmental center
right
that can really be a special athlete, I think there are guys that can go with maybe over Van Pran. So I like Van Pran. It's just he's like this muddy projection where it's like it's not really where you want to be. He's an experienced player in the SEC, but he's gonna have a learning curve.
We talk a lot about how you want the Tomlin Trinity of the combine interview, the pro day visit from the top brass, and the top 30 visit there. The only person who could still get that as far as the center class is Sedrick Van Pran. Now, part of that's also because he goes to Georgia, so he automatically gets the Steelers are going to go to his pro day. But also, Duke isn't a pro day school typically, and West Virginia also not as much for the Steelers on all cases here. But a top 30 visit for Frazier, as well as talking to him at the Senior Bowl, and Graham Barton, a combine interview here. Does that weigh into how you see? Also, I meant to say Jackson Powers Johnson was just a top 30 visit, and the Steelers sent Pat Meyer to his. The Steelers also don't go out to the West Coast with their top brass in pro day visits very often, if ever. But point being, there's a different smattering of how the Steelers have been in touch with these guys during this draft process. Do you read into that at all, or do you stick to to stick with what we see on the tape, what we've seen with the measurables, and how that's going to push the value of these guys?
Yeah, I think I have been burned too many times by mocking a center way too high to be like, yeah, man, that guy's gonna go there. Linderbaum, I know he went like 25th overall, but like people were talking about him as like remember when they talked about him as like a top 10 pick? Like,
yeah, so there was a time when he was being pushed as such. I remember.
Yeah, like so you like look at like his chart in like the mock draft database, which is actually stunningly accurate. I'm pretty sure he ended up like 24th overall on that. He went 25th, but it like after the combine, he is at number 8, and then he just falls. And like, that's where it was. Like, I think that's kind of what happens with the public with these centers. It's like, all right, Jackson Powers Johnson has an elite day at the Senior Bowl. Boom, he's going up like 30 picks all of a sudden. He's probably going to land at like 40. Like, that's where it happens. So despite the talent of these guys, and I love Jackson Powers Johnson. He's a top 20 player to me in this class. He's a great player. Like, Zach Frazier is a top 35 player in this class. You could probably dock that by like 15, 20 picks. It's what happens. Creed Humphrey went, 63rd overall or something like that, right? And he was a top there were people clamoring for him as a top 20 player at the time. Like, 100%. That's the type of guy he was. So just because, Jackson Powers Johnson slips down boards and is being mocked in like 40s now, doesn't mean this guy isn't still the special talent you think he is. He is a very good player. And as I said earlier, the type of guy that I think can change the outlook of a run game, especially a wide zone run game, where you just plop him in and you're like, dude, that guy can go reach that backside backer, no problem. And so I think, the thoughts of where these guys are going to go slipping a little bit is not indicative of their true talent.
Absolutely. We got to get out of here. Nick, it's always great to get your insight here. Thanks so much for joining us. He's Nick Farabaugh. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me at Farabaugh FB. Make sure to check that out. Check out stuff at Steelers Now, as you mentioned. We are dropping more stuff. We're dropping like rankings and stuff this week. We're going to drop big boards, all that stuff, pre-draft visit tracker. If you want interest tracker, we got all that over there.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday. Talk about your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back tomorrow to finish out the week. We'll see you then.